What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. Mark Callaway began his professional wrestling career in 1987 as Texas Red against the legendary Bruiser Brody at World Class Championship Wrestling. For the next few years, he would work house shows under several different names, including Texas Big Red, Boris Dragu, and the Commando. In late 1989, he signed a contract with World Championship Wrestling and worked under the name Mean Mark Callis. Upon debuting for WCW, he would be a part of the tag team The Skyscrapers with Dan Spivey after Sid Vicious had suffered an injury. The Skyscrapers would begin to get a push when they were put into a rivalry with the Road Warriors, including a match at Clash of the Champions 10. Unfortunately, the Skyscrapers wouldn't last much longer, as Spivey would leave WCW days before they were scheduled to face the Road Warriors in a Chicago street fight at Wrestle War in February 1990. Mean Mark Callis would begin a singles run soon after and was managed by Paul E. Dangerously, or as you know him today as Paul Heyman, getting wins over the likes of Flying Brian Pillman and even challenging Lex Luger for the United States Championship at the Great American Bash 1990, but was unsuccessful. Around that time, he would be in negotiations with WCW for a brand new contract, but things didn't go well, as Booker Ole Anderson would say that no one would ever pay money to see him wrestle, lighting a fire within Callaway, and began arrangements to meet with Vince McMahon to potentially start working with the World Wrestling Federation, and was even recommended by several talents. He would have his final WCW match in September 1990 and officially signed with the World Wrestling Federation a month later in October, making his debut as a member of the $1 Million Team at Survivor Series on November 22nd, 1990 under the name The Undertaker. Since then, he has become one of the greatest of all time, with a career that spanned across 30 years, holding several championships and accomplishments, including an undefeated streak at WrestleMania and being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022. It's crazy to think that it's now been 35 years since Undertaker's debut, and he's stuck through the ups and downs, staying loyal the entire time. But imagine a world where either he decided to stay with WCW or go somewhere else and not join the World Wrestling Federation in 1990. So that's going to be the topic of today's video. We're discussing what if Undertaker didn't join the World Wrestling Federation in 1990. A couple weeks back with our John Cena episode, we did tease that we were going to make an announcement of what will happen with this channel in 2026. So I'm here to announce that just like John Cena in 2025, I will be doing one Undertaker what if video a month throughout the duration of 2026. So if there's any suggestions that you have to put in the comments section below, keep your suggestions Undertaker related and they may be used throughout the year. But let's start this video with 5 big points. And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share this to all your friends, subscribe, and press the notification bell for when future episodes get released, and leave a comment down below about today's topic or suggesting a future topic for an episode of Pro Wrestling What If. Point number 1, works for New Japan Pro Wrestling in 1990. Once Callaway was told that no one would pay to see him wrestle, he knew that he had to leave WCW. Had he re-signed with the company, he wouldn't have made it too far up the card, and I'm not sure the likeliness of him winning a championship for that matter. Yes, he was starting to get championship matches like the one at the Great American Bash that I mentioned, but was likely only to look like a threat to the champion. His last match in WCW, surprisingly enough, was against Sting for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship at a house show in Greensboro. Even though he was being managed by Paul E. Dangerously, I do think the partnership would have ended before the formation of the Dangerous Alliance faction after Halloween Havoc 1991. If Vince McMahon had decided not to hire him after the meeting, the only other place to go would have been New Japan Pro Wrestling. Mark Callaway had briefly worked for them while in WCW under the name Punisher Dice Morgan, competing in the Big Fight series throughout March 1990 in various tag team matches with either Bam Bam Bigelow or Scott Hall. With how big he was and his athleticism, it would have been a perfect fit for him to have gone to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Just look at Vader and how his career turned out after his presentation in the company. When he became full-time in the United States for WCW, he was a big deal and was pushed to the top. Speaking of Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow, they had formed the tag team Big Bad and Dangerous in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and maybe Mark Callaway could have been added to make the team as a faction. Point number 2, Hulk Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair happens at WrestleMania 8. One of the biggest missed opportunities that the World Wrestling Federation never capitalized on was having a Hulk Hogan-Ric Flair match at WrestleMania 8. Having the two most popular professional wrestlers in the entire business at the time go head-to-head while they were in the same company. We ended up getting it 2 years later in WCW during Hogan's debut at Bash at the Beach, but the hype for this just wasn't as big as it would have been in 1992. The match was originally advertised for WrestleMania 8, but got switched to having Ric Flair defend the World Wrestling Federation Championship against Randy Savage, and the main event being a singles match between Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice that would end in a disqualification. With Undertaker not making his debut in 1990, the entirety of the road to WrestleMania 8 may have been different, as Hulk Hogan wouldn't end up dropping the World Wrestling Federation Championship at Survivor Series 1991. Meaning when it comes to this Tuesday in Texas, the shenanigans involving the World Wrestling Federation Championship would not occur, and Hogan wouldn't have been stripped of it. The 1992 Royal Rumble match may have been a completely different concept, since the World Wrestling Federation Championship wouldn't be on the line here, either being an over-the-top rope battle royal with bragging rights as it was until 1991, or perhaps this may have been the year to introduce the concept of getting a championship match at WrestleMania instead of the following year when Yokozuna had won it. In the real timeline, Undertaker and Jake Roberts had a match at WrestleMania 8, so who would have been the one to have a match with Jake Roberts since Undertaker isn't in the company? It was originally planned to have Jake Roberts culminate his feud with Randy Savage at the event that had been going on since SummerSlam 1991 when Roberts tried ruining the wedding reception. So with Ric Flair not being able to face Randy Savage would have meant that the Hogan-Flair match at WrestleMania 8 ends up happening. Whether the World Wrestling Federation Championship was involved in the feud or not, that's something I wouldn't be too sure of, as it could go either way. Point number 3, returns to WCW but never becomes world champion. Even though Mark Callaway would leave WCW in 1990, I think there would have been a big possibility that he would return to the company at some point in the mid-1990s. Eric Bischoff would have likely wanted to get him signed to WCW after discovering what he would have done in his stint with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Bischoff would have been watching because a certain storyline that happened would end up being the main inspiration for the formation of the New World Order. Many people would say that Callaway would work for Vince McMahon once his New Japan Pro Wrestling stint would conclude, but I think that wouldn't have been the case. When Undertaker was signed in 1990, it was still the golden era where the World Wrestling Federation was at a high and was doing well financially. Unfortunately, the World Wrestling Federation in the mid-1990s was the complete opposite and even had to downgrade from arenas to high school gyms to do shows in. WCW would have offered a much bigger contract to where the difference would be significant, and Vince McMahon would not have been able to match it. As big of a deal as Mark Callaway would have been before returning to WCW, I don't think he would have had a run as world champion during this stint. The mid-1990s for WCW revolved around the former World Wrestling Federation superstars, whether that be Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, or even Lex Luger. Especially when the NWO storyline would officially be in full swing, the World Heavyweight Championship would be around Hogan's waist on and off for multiple years. Even when you reach 1998, the only homegrown type of superstar they would have been pushing hard at that time would be Goldberg with his undefeated streak. If anything, he may have ended up becoming the WCW United States Champion on one or two occasions and could have been the one who drops it to Goldberg in 1998 depending on when he has it. When it comes to a potential run with the World Wrestling Federation, that may have happened after WCW would be bought out in 2001. Who's to say though that his second WCW run would last that long, and he may have arrived during the height of the Attitude Era in 1999 or 2000.
Shoutout goes to Jackson Weingart, Jada Sanchez, Fox Starkiller, Lola Pines, Hayden Sarabo, Skulchin, The Real Samuel Randall 1990, Quiet Ninja Riot, Adam Heb 01, and Chris Leon.
And the reason that they ended up getting a shout out is because they joined our YouTube channel membership, which only cost $1.99 a month. Not only do you get the shout out, but you do get lots of other perks, including early access to every single video and shorts that we produce on this channel. So definitely consider joining our YouTube channel membership. It will be greatly appreciated and will go a long way of helping out this channel a lot. So definitely consider it, but let's get right back to the video. Point number 4, several careers don't get launched. Now I feel talking about the amount of superstars whose careers would have drastically changed would have been 5 points alone for this topic. However, I'm gonna only mention a couple of them for this video, but they are very important
important people involving Undertaker's career. The first person I'll bring up is Paul Bearer, who was brought in as Undertaker's new manager, replacing Brother Love in February 1991. Prior to joining the World Wrestling Federation, he worked under the name Percy Pringle III and even had blonde hair instead of the black hair he had when he was Paul Bearer. Without Undertaker in the company, there's a big chance he doesn't get hired, since his real-life background as a funeral director is what got him the job in the first place. The next person to discuss would be Mankind, as he directly feuded with Undertaker upon making his World Wrestling Federation debut. Sure, he may have been pushed near the main event scene with the match against Shawn Michaels at In Your House 10, but what about the events that took place afterwards? King of the Ring 1998 was when the famous Hell in a Cell match took place that had Undertaker throw Mankind off the top of the cell and elevated Mankind's career to an all-time high. That moment would also help the World Wrestling Federation continue to win each week during the Monday Night Wars until WCW would be bought out in 2001. Without that moment, I don't think Mankind would end up winning the World Wrestling Federation Championship multiple times and become the beloved character with Mr. Saka we would end up seeing. Last but certainly not least, we have to discuss about what would be Undertaker's brother, the Big Red Machine Kane. When Glenn Jacobs was initially brought into the World Wrestling Federation, it was under the horrendous dentist gimmick that was Isaac Yankem DDS. He would be repackaged in late 1996 as Fake Diesel that would be just as bad, maybe even worse for him to portray as. Obviously, without the Undertaker gimmick, Kane doesn't exist either, and Glenn Jacobs would have probably been released from the World Wrestling Federation shortly after the Fake Diesel gimmick. He may have ended up somewhere else like WCW, but I don't think his career would have been big enough to be a Hall of Famer and later on get many people behind him to become the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee in 2018 that he still is today as I'm recording this video and it gets released. And the fifth and final point, his career doesn't last 30 years. If it wasn't for Mark Callaway going to the World Wrestling Federation and becoming The Undertaker, his career doesn't last as long as it did. In his first few years in the business, he worked a style of wrestling that shouldn't be done by men his size. His finishing move was walking the top rope like his old school signature move and jumping off of it with an elbow drop to his opponent. A move that would affect his body so much that Undertaker admitted to already walking with a limp by the time he got signed to the World Wrestling Federation in 1990. Working the style he would have shortened his career much quicker and required more surgeries than he's probably endured throughout his lifetime. While working as The Undertaker, his body didn't take too much punishment for the first 5 years or so due to working the very slow and methodical style that didn't require him to bump too much. It wasn't until the late 90s, with the dive over the top rope and other things added, that he'd be able to evolve his moveset and work a different style. Even though Undertaker had quite a bit of injuries piling up over the years, another thing that kept his career going was the streak at WrestleMania. Although it wasn't acknowledged until the early 2000s, Undertaker's undefeated streak would become a must-watch spectacle for many years when it came to WrestleMania. When he became a part-time wrestler in 2011, the main show he was involved in would be WrestleMania in order to keep building up the streak that would come to an end in 2014. If Callaway were to have signed with the World Wrestling Federation or WWE later on in his career, he simply wouldn't have become The Undertaker. Undertaker was a character that had to begin during the golden era where characters were a huge thing, otherwise it wouldn't have worked as well in any of the eras after. With him joining much later and with a different character would have meant that the idea of a WrestleMania undefeated streak doesn't end up happening. His career would come to an end in 2020, but without all those things he did in the WWE, it's very likely that his career would have ended much earlier. His legacy wouldn't have become as big as it was, and most of us wouldn't have considered Mark Callaway in this timeline as arguably the greatest professional wrestler of all time.